Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Mark Medley Show. This is my podcast where I have the opportunity to kind of express some thoughts and to hopefully challenge those who are listening to think. You may agree or disagree, and to be honest with you, the purpose of the podcast is not necessarily to gain agreement, but if nothing else, cause you to go, I never looked at it that way. I never thought about it like that. Well, that is the case with this particular episode today. And I can tell you now, it's probably going to be one that many of you may not like, because many of you listening may be partaking in some of the activities and attitudes and behaviors of which could be considered me being critical of or criticizing. But it has to do with this whole notion of respect, particularly respecting one's self. And again, this is my opinion, so you can agree or disagree. It really is up to you. But this past week in my building at school, this past week in October was considered the week of respect. And that's where we had a week of activities to focus solely on respect. Each day we had different color shirts, or we wore superhero shirts, or we wore our favorite jersey, or one day we wore blue jeans and sneakers to stomp out bullying, to again remind us to be respectful of each other. On April 29th, 1967, Aretha Franklin, dubbed as the Queen of Soul, released a song that was titled R-E-S-P-E-C-T, Find Out What That Means to Me. And throughout the song, Aretha sings what she feels is respect. She sings about what she considers respectful. So the title of the song is R-E-S-P-E-C-T. And then she goes on to say, find out what that means to me. And that's what I'm using for this podcast title today. Tune in and find out what R-E-S-P-E-C-T means to me. Now again, I can tell you now, many of you will not agree with it and think I'm taking things too far or thinking too deep. It could be just me. But it is amazing to me, and I've been posting this on social media, particularly this morning. I kind of went on like a little rant. But it's very interesting to me how we are so comfortable with walking around being raggedy. And what do you mean by that, Mark? That means the style, or I guess the fashion, is these ripped jeans, or are these ripped jeans, where you actually purchase a pair of jeans that are filled with holes and strings. And I posted it. I don't understand how we're just so comfortable walking around looking raggedy. For me, that sends a message. Now, that may not be the intent of the designer or the purchaser. But when I see that, to me, it sends a message not of fashion or style, but it sends a message of sorriness, a message of slackness, a message of laziness, a message of I don't care what I look like when I come out into the street or go to my place of business or to my school or wherever. And the ripped jeans is just one example. Now, I harp on that one a lot because, again, in my mind, going to a store and paying decent money for an article of clothing that is already torn into shreds, and we buy that and we put that on and we parade that out into the streets or wherever we're going, it just does not make sense to me. And that's just one thing in a laundry list of things to me that does not show even respect for yourself. Another one, case in point, and I don't know if in every area they experience the same thing, but I know in some areas that I frequent, folks actually come out of the house in their pajamas. And when I say out of the house, I'm not talking about just going out the door to place the trash in the trash can or to run out real quickly to start up their car and run back in the house. I am talking about wearing pajamas. clothing that was designed to be worn in the house, in your bedroom, or maybe if you're not going out of the house, is worn as if it was clothing to go outdoors. I've had parents actually come to my school in pajamas and head rags and slippers. They look as if they were around their house, and yet they've chosen to wear that outside of the house to go transact business. To me, again, that's disrespectful to yourself. That does not show respect to yourself, that you're coming out of the house in a garment that was designed to be worn in the house. It was not designed for the public to see you in. And yet we've now taken that, and sometimes not only do we wear the pajamas, we turn them inside out so that the tag can be shown on the outside instead of, again, shown on the inside. That's just another one. Years ago, and I still see it every now and again, folks walking around with their shoes untied. Big old boots on, big old clunky boots untied. No tie, shoes not tied up, walking around making all the noise because they're falling off and on the foot as the person walks because they're not tied. Again, that does not show self-respect to me. It's sad that we're constantly being driven in terms of our standards by our rappers, our entertainers, our athletes, the so-called fashion designers, because these are the folks who are making money while we're out looking silly, in my view. And again, I told you this one was going to be critical. To me, all of that looks silly. The same thing with the baseball caps. You're going to buy a baseball cap and you're going to leave the price tag or either the sticker on top of the bill on. And then you're going to turn it all kinds of ways. Twist it halfway to the side, maybe in the back, off on another angle. In any way that you look at it, it's worn in a way that is not in the way it was designed to. It's almost like we're into this anti-establishment, like the way it's supposed to be done, we're not going to do it. And to me, that is not respectful. It does not respect yourself. And then the granddaddy of them all, of course, would be the sagging pants, of which makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever that a young man or young woman, for that matter, would be out walking in the street with their pants hanging below their waist, exposing their underwear. Now, I don't know what makes them think that anybody else in the street would like to see their underwear. I don't get that. But yet they will walk around the streets with their pants hanging below their belt, if they have a belt on, exposing their underwear, whatever color it may be. Gray, I don't know if it's gray or if it's dirt, or if they're white, or if they're purple, or if they're black, or whatever it is. I've seen this silliness even extended to riding a bicycle. I've seen guys on a bicycle trying to ride a bike while their pants were falling off of their backsides. Again, makes absolutely no sense. It's almost as if folks are trying to tell the world, we don't care. We're sorry, we're slack, we're slothful. We don't want to do things in its proper manner. We don't want to do things the way that it's supposed to be done, and we're trying to show the world that. Now, that's my interpretation. That may not be what's meant by the person who put it on, but that's how I interpret it. If I have to sit there and look at your underwear because your pants are below your belt intentionally, something is wrong with that to me. It's almost as if we just want to do things improperly. Another one for me that's a hot button, and folks debate this. Some say it's not a matter of what you're called, but what you respond to. I've heard the rationalization of, well, we've taken the term now and made it our own because at one time it was used to degrade us, so now we've taken it so we can use it amongst ourselves. I've heard all of that rationalization, but it still does not work for me. Every time I turn around, I'm hearing someone in a conversation talking about my nigger, that nigger, yo, my nigger. You should have seen that nigger. Now, as an African American who knows his history, I find that very offensive, and not just from the standpoint of being called that, it's from the standpoint of knowing the history of the word, of how it was used and when it was used and still used, of the meaning behind it. When that word was used, African Americans were considered less than a human being. They were less than that 3/5 of a man that they put in the Constitution or in the Articles or wherever that whole line is. When they were saying all men are created equal, people of color were not created in that. So whenever, or were not a part of that, So whenever now you're running around here talking about my nigga, yo, my nigga, that sounds ignorant to me. Now, I don't care how many folks I've heard scholars try to justify why African Americans and Hispanics and everybody else should be able to use the word nigger freely because it's just part of our vernacular. I disagree. I vehemently disagree. No one should be able to use that word. But again, we're anti-establishment. We want to do everything against the way things have been done. And that's not serving us well. That's taking us down a road of destruction. And I'm going to touch on somebody else's hot button. I know it is. And again, this is a personal for me. I'm not into these tattoos. To me, tattoos are ugly. They are. To me, it's like writing graffiti on one's body. It's like taking a can of spray paint and spray painting on somebody's house. That's the same difference it is for me in terms of tattoos on the body. Again, a personal observation. I personally don't think tattoos look good on African American skin. I don't think tattoos look good on black people. And again, that's debatable. That's my personal views. I don't think they look the best on folks who are not of color. There was a time when tattoos generally were for folks like truck drivers and sailors. Now everybody and his brother and mother has some form of a tattoo. The other crazy thing about that, again, if we knew our history, there was a time when the slave master put his brand on us, and now we brand ourselves. The slave master had a brand to make sure everyone knew who his or her slave was. And now we are branding ourselves. We're putting brands on ourselves of all kinds of messages. Personal opinion, I'm going to keep putting that disclaimer out there. Because I told you up front, many of you who have listened this far may or may not agree. You may be asking the question, who he think he is to be criticizing all these things. Well, I am who I am, and it is my particular podcast, and I have the opportunity to share. And again, it's for you to at least think about it. Because I am convinced we don't understand and know our history well enough. That's why we do some of the things that we do. Because if we understood our history, particularly as people of color and African Americans, we might not want to be wearing jeans that's ripped, because at the time we were wearing those because we didn't have anything else. We might not want to be tattooing ourselves because there was a time when we were branded to show whose slave we were. We might not want to be running around here calling each other nigger because there was a time, and still to this day, particularly under this current administration, where that term is degraded and means you are less than a human being. So if you want to find out what respect means to me, do the opposite of all of those things. I do not find ripped jeans respectful. I do not find pants sagging respectful. I do not find caps twisted and flipped any old kind of way with some sticker still on the bill necessarily respectful. I do not find running around here calling each other nigger respectful. So if you've listened this far, I do thank you. Hopefully I've given you some things to think about. In the words of Aretha, all the way back in 1967, RESPECT. And hopefully after listening for these 15 minutes or so, you have a better idea of what respect or disrespect means to me. We have got to set the bar higher. We have got to have a higher standard than the standard that's set by us, by the rappers, by the entertainers, by the athletes, by the fashion designers. We have got to stop falling prey and spending our hard-earned money on things that make us continually look like someone who doesn't care. Continuously make us look like someone who's lazy. Continuously make us look like someone who's slothful. Continuously make us look like someone who is slack. We have got to raise the bar. This is Mark Medley, and I thank you for listening to the Mark Medley Show. I hope it's not your last, because they're all not quite as critical. But I do think this is a message we all need to hear. I say this out of love, not out of hate, not out of anger, but I do say it out of love for ourselves and love for myself. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, night, whenever you may be listening to this. And you can catch us on all the major distribution sites where podcasts are heard.